President of Ireland, His Excellency Micheal D Higins.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Trevor Morris and I'm the Dean of the Law School here at NYU. I want to welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us for the 11th annual Micheal Noel Lecture here at NYU Law School. The lecture this year is being presented by His Excellency the President of Ireland, Micheal Higgins. And his lecture is titled The European Union Towards a Discourse of Reconnection, Renewal, and Hope. President Higgins will be formally introduced in just a moment by my colleague, but let me say how personally grateful I am to him for joining us tonight and how much we're all looking forward to hearing from him. Let me also say thank you to the many members of the Irish community who have joined us. I know many of you from some distance to be here tonight. We're grateful that you joined us as well. Let's say a word or two about the Micheal Noel Lecture. The lecture series is hosted by our Jean Monnet Center for International and Regional Economic Law and Justice here at NYU Law School. The Jean Monnet Center focuses on the study of international and European economic integration and European Union law, and it's directed by our colleague Gráinne de Burke. The Micheal Noel Lecture promotes an awareness of the current state of the European Union. Each year, a prominent member of the legal and political administration of the Union is welcome to present their perspective on the state of the European Union. In recent years, we've had lectures presented by the Vice President of the European Court of Justice and the former Prime Minister of Greece, among others. It's my happy duty now to introduce Gráinne de Burke, who will introduce President Higgins. Gráinne is our Florence Ellenwood Allen Professor of Law, Faculty Director of the Hauser Global Law School, and Director of the Jean Monnet Center. She is one of the leading scholars on European Union law and its relationship to national legal systems and the international legal order. She joined us on the faculty in 2011 from Harvard, having previously spent time here as a research fellow and as a Hauser Global Visiting Professor. An outstanding scholar and teacher and colleague, Gráinne really is a treasured member of our community, and I'm happy to give her the microphone now. Gráinne de Burke.
So, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce tonight the person who's going to deliver the 11th annual Micheal Noel Lecture at NYU and at our Jean Monnet Center for European and International Economic Law and Justice. So, as the Dean mentioned, and as you'll see from the brochure, we've been proud to welcome a line of distinguished heads of state and government from European member states and presidents of the various European institutions in previous years to give this Micheal Noel Lecture. But it gives me particular pleasure this year, not only because of my own connection to the country he represents, but also for many more reasons, to welcome the President of Ireland to give this lecture. Agus do bhór sin bhá an fóild mór a chur ribh an uachtaráin agus a bhean chéile chuig gonscoil nua áireach agus chuig an scoil delí an seo nacht. So let me say a few words first about the institution of the Irish presidency before I go on to introduce the current holder of that office. So since 1938, not long after regaining its independence, Ireland has had a succession of distinguished presidents, men of dignity and character elected by popular vote to represent the Irish people and the Irish state. And the understanding is that this presidency was not to be a political office, but primarily a ceremonial one, intended to provide the nation with a figurehead, a person of high distinction, who'd represent the people on occasions, official occasions outside and inside the state. And so it was with each of the 6 men who held that office for several decades. Then in 1990, Ireland elected its first female president, Mary Robinson, who was widely considered by the end of her term to have transformed the presidency. It wasn't any longer a ceremonial role for distant, albeit highly respected figures to appear primarily on state occasions and remain largely silent on matters of the day, but she injected an enormous energy into the presidential office, reached out to different communities and spoke up on matters of social concern and justice. Her presidency was then followed by the election of another female president, Mary McAleese, who continued the high-profile, energetic style of an engaged approach and a similarly sympathetic, outreaching style. And I hope His Excellency will not be offended if I say that maybe there was some trepidation in the run-up to the recent presidential election as to whether, if a man were to be elected this time, could any man possibly live up to the expectations generated by the two Marys. We're all delighted to say that no sooner was this current president elected than it became immediately obvious that those expectations would be more than met. So Micheal D Higins has for several decades already been a much respected and beloved figure in Irish life and a leading public intellectual. He began his working life as a factory worker and a clerk before going on to become the first in his family to access higher education, going on to study at University College Galway, of which he's now an honorary professor, to the University of Manchester and to Indiana University here in the United States. His talents, achievements, and I would say even his identities are multiple. He's been an academic, lecturing in political science and sociology at University College Galway. He's a poet, having published 4 collections of poetry, a politician, a writer and broadcaster, a leading promoter of the arts, reinvigorating the Irish film industry, supporting the theatre, music and literature, as well as a strong promoter of the Irish language, and, very importantly, a long-time human rights activist. In his political career, he's been a mayor, a TD, as a member of the Irish Parliament, a senator, Minister for the Arts, Culture and the Gaeltacht, which is the parts of Ireland where Irish is still spoken as a native language. In his political career, he's spoken often about ethics and the need for a new ethical approach to politics. And I think in his case, these haven't just been hollow words as they are for many, but his own track record as a public servant for many years and decades shows that he actually put his own advice into practice, and he stood out for his willingness to stand up for his principles, and I think where necessary to speak out against the prevailing consensus. And while he is Ireland's first citizen and representative, his identity and his work, I think, has not just been as an Irish citizen, but also as a European citizen and as an internationally engaged actor. He's long campaigned on matters of international human rights and justice, writing and working on issues arising in Nicaragua, Chile, Cambodia, El Salvador, Iraq and Somalia. And in 1992 he was awarded a prize named after another famous Irishman, Sean McBride, by the International Peace Bureau for this work. More recently he's been speaking out on Europe-wide issues, including a speech to the European Parliament in 2013 on issues of citizenship, solidarity and political legitimacy during very difficult times for the EU. And more generally, since being elected president, he's spoken out on many issues of social justice, not only in Ireland but across Europe, including disability, poverty, economic austerity, racism, homophobia and the refugee crisis. And always, I think, with the emphasis on the idea of inclusion and the importance of solidarity. And it's wonderful for us tonight to see such a turnout for this lecture. It's wonderful for the law school, for the university, but also for the wider Irish community who, as the Dean said, have travelled from far and wide to be here. And tá fáilte roimh go léir an seo nach. The topic and purpose of the Micheal Noel lecture, again, as the Dean pointed out, is to reflect on the state of the European Union. And anyone who's interested in knowing something about the state of the European Union these days needs only to look at the front page of any newspaper, not only in Europe, but also here in the US. And I noticed this morning that Wolfgang Munchau, who's a writer on the EU for the Financial Times, wrote that Europe is suffering from 5 concurrent crises, a series of unforeseen shocks at different stages of development. And he mentions the refugee crisis from Syria, the Eurozone periphery debt, a global economic downturn, Russia's annexation of Crimea and its aftermath, and most recently Volkswagen's crimes and misdemeanors. So the President's lecture tonight, he has a challenge ahead of him, could not come at a more timely moment, and we're looking forward very much to hearing what he has to say. So for all these and for many more reasons, we're delighted and honoured to welcome here tonight as our 11th annual Micheal Noel lecture to speak to us on the subject of the European Union towards a discourse of reconnection, renewal and hope, His Excellency, the President of Ireland, Micheal D Higins.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I begin by thanking Dr. Gronya de Borca, Director of the Jean Monnet Centre for Regional and International Economic Law and Justice, here at your university, for her invitation to give the annual Micheal Noel Lecture. Muile Buicas, agus Buicach Banach that are not on our shoe of it. I got it from Lee, St. Oscar Coyul Show, I am convinced that the title I have given to my lecture, let me say first of all, because it is an honour to deliver this lecture in honour of a great European, and as you have just heard, as part of a sequence of lectures that have acquired a prestigious reputation. The title I have given to my lecture is a response to what I feel is a great contemporary democratic challenge, one of a regional kind insofar as its focus is the European Union, but one that is also global, the challenge of delivering and deepening democracy. I am convinced that the challenges of connecting citizens, of creating a space for vision and innovation in theory and policy, of offering hope at a time of great change on a planet scarred by growing inequality, these challenges are also global in nature. The discourse that prevails in relation to European issues at the present time, including the contributions of a distinguished but at times lonely set of academic voices, usually refers to a crisis of legitimacy in an institutional sense. And of course the roots of this discourse on the legitimacy gap these roots are as old as the Union itself. But they have acquired an increasing urgency due to the fiscal crisis of member states, the response of different governments, and the effect that these responses have had on their citizens. I want to suggest that if we are to respond adequately to this issue of legitimacy, it requires us, I believe, to look at the social sciences, remembering that all policy at some point bases itself, or at least seeks to justify itself, in terms of some scholarship, of theoretical assumptions. In doing so, this examination of the social sciences, we need to test the transparency, the adequacy, and the power of such assumptions. Those assumptions that are at the heart of the informing theoretical fields. I suggest that the discourse I seek in the title of my lecture assumes also a pluralism of scholarship, which frankly I believe has been in decline for some time. As a consequence, we are, as flies in a jar of honey, trapped in a single paradigm of thought in the social sciences, and above all else in economic theory, from which we are finding it difficult to escape. Yes, we perceive the need for new thinking that will source new policies that might address the human challenges of social inclusion, poverty elimination, gender equality, public health, and security in its widest sense. We perceive this need, but we seem unable to act. A world of ethical possibility seems beyond our reach. We quite often wait for rating agencies daily to indicate what kind of future might be in store for us. That single paradigm of thought to which I refer has a specific historical location. It comes from a moment of hubris that suggested that literally all aspects of life could be fitted within an explanatory frame of extreme